Well, good evening and welcome to the Healer's Connection. I'm Dr. Michelle Petacola, founder of Secrets of Life and Death and Second Chance Secrets, helping smart men and women reinvent their lives after loss, divorce, or a major life challenge. And I've created this Healers series, the Healers Connection, in order to introduce you to many healing modalities so that you can find the healing modality that's going to serve you the best. So tonight, I have a very, very special guest who's going to be talking about how to help us with our mindset. To begin with, we meet twice a month. The second Tuesday of the month at 5 p.m. That's what we're meeting at right now. And the fourth Friday early in the morning. And we're talking about Pacific Standard Daylight Saving Time, Friday morning at 9 a.m. So if you are in the Texas or the West Coast, or the East Coast or the Midwest, make sure you make the correction in the time, but put it in your calendar because we have some amazing guests coming up. If you would go ahead and post your name or alter name or nickname or however you want to identify yourself to protect yourself, please put that in the chat and why you are here tonight, what you're hoping to get out of this conversation, or even a challenge that you're struggling with, you can go ahead and put that there. We're going to have a 15-minute presentation by our guest, and then we're going to open it up to questions and answers. And then if there's time, we will even do a little bit of laser coaching. So hang on to your hat and we will begin. I want to introduce you to Dr. GraceGwitira, Gwitira, Dr. GraceGwitira. And Dr. Grace is an award-winning writer, speaker, trainer, and coach. A doctor of management in organizational leadership, Dr. Grace helps individuals, leaders, experts, and entrepreneurs to get to their next level of success by providing personalized training and individualized coaching in areas of leadership, emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, stress management, and book writing. She will explain how to self-regulate your way to good health and success. So you'd be surprised at how much your mind affects your health. So please, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Grace on. Actually, I'm going to put her on the spotlight to give her presentation.
Thank you for having me here. I feel very honored. I'm going to just put some slides on here so you can, those who use their eyes to learn can also learn that way. But definitely I'm so honored to be invited to come and speak here. And the topic that I'm going to talk about is self-regulation is your secret superpower. And that's because I really truly believe that if you're able to self-regulate yourself, you have a superpower within you that you can leverage to your own advantage. Once upon a time when I was working in corporate, I remember having my manager on the phone along with my counterpart from Aurora. My counterpart was from Aurora, as was my manager at the time. And I was based in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So we were on the phone discussing a certain topic. And then she made the comment that she believed that a customer did not, was not able to see, because I'd sent a report to her, and so she believed that the customer was not going to be able to see it because she believed that the customer did not have the version of Outlook that would allow her to see it in the order in which it was created. So I just simply said, well, it's possible. I mean, I don't mind resending the spreadsheet as an attachment, which is what she was suggesting that I do, because I had created the report and I had pasted the spreadsheet in the body of the email. And so she said, no, the customer is not going to be able to read it because when it gets to the customer, it will all be mixed up. And so I just simply said, well, that is possible, but we don't know that right now, because the customer had responded back to me saying, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the report. The customer did not say anything to me about the fact that they were having problems with the report, that it was mixed up or anything. So anyway, I just said, well, some people have the updated one, and some people do not. So we don't really have a way to know, but I don't mind resending it as an attachment. But the fact that I didn't agree with what she was saying, and my counterpart also didn't agree with what she was saying. So she got really upset on the phone and hung up, which was just the weirdest thing that ever happened in a meeting with one of my superiors. And so, and from that day, that was the last time that she and I had a good relationship, because she started picking on me from there. You know, we had such a great relationship at the beginning, but after that day that I disagreed with her, she was undermining my authority, and she would plain out be disrespectful to me in front of my subordinates, our subordinates. So it was very interesting that she was not able to self-regulate herself to get a win-win situation out of this very simple. It wasn't really a big deal, really, but she lost it on the phone and wasn't able to maintain that relationship. And unfortunately, because of that, because that happened, some people were noticed that she was definitely hostile towards me. And we ended up having a lot of people leave because they felt that her behavior towards me was unjust, and they just saw her as cruel, which was unfortunate because we lost a lot of key personnel. And so self-regulation is definitely important if you are a leader in any area at all. Well, self-regulation is actually a part of it's part of, it's one of the pillars, one of the elements of emotional intelligence. And so I put here, there are 5 elements of emotional intelligence that we know about. There is self-awareness, which is knowing your emotions and being aware of what you're actually feeling at a certain time and being able to identify your emotions. Then there's self-regulation, which is how you manage those emotions for better outcomes. Then there's the third one is supposed to say motivation, which is motivating yourself, and then empathy and how you connect with other people and speak with them. Okay, then so here's what self-regulation is according to psychology. Self-regulation is ability to manage your thoughts and your emotions for better outcome. So that's managing your thoughts, because whatever you think pretty much dictates how you end up feeling about any kind of anything you're confronted with. And whether you think, if you think something is bad or someone is attacking you or something terrible is going to happen to you, it's going to cause you to develop certain feelings or emotions. And then how you manage those emotions is going to determine what your actions are in response to that initial thought or in that initial trigger event. And so self-regulation helps you to be able to maintain your composure in heated situations. This is the importance of self-regulation. First of all, it allows you to stay calm in tough situations. Some of you might have experienced it or even seen it when there's a stressful event that is happening, somebody not being able to actually think as to what action should I take. I know in movies, in some movies that I've watched, they've demonstrated this really well, where they can't think, they just remain, they can't take the action they need to mitigate some kind of risk that's happening. Because they haven't been able to stay calm, they just go into a state of panic. And so obviously we don't want that to happen. Also flexibility when things change. When I was working in corporate once upon a time, the company that I used to work for was bought out by our competitor. So when it was bought by our competitor, there were a lot of changes that happened within the organization as expected. Whenever there's new ownership or new leadership, or a company has been taken over by another company, or mergers and acquisitions, basically. there will there's almost always some change that will happen. And the people that were in my team, some people had a hard time adjusting to the changes that the new leadership brought. They had a hard time adjusting to those changes. And so that led to, whenever we were in training, there was a lot of pushback on the trainer. And the environment was just very tense and not healthy at all. But having the ability, it was so tense to the degree that the trainer finally said, "You are here by choice. Just as you're here by choice, and if you really don't want to be here, you're also free to go." Because it was the first time I've ever heard a superior say those words to somebody before. And I thought, if these people were able to self-regulate their emotions and really think about what they are doing or not doing and how this is going to benefit or not benefit them, they would be more flexible to make the changes. Because the people that made the changes, they ended up thriving in this new organization. It also prevents you from overreacting and acting impulsively, and which can help you in your relationships. Sometimes imagine when you're in a heated argument with someone, if you've ever been in a heated argument with somebody, imagine that somebody says something and people just overreact and you don't even hear what the other person is saying. But when you have the ability to self-regulate, you're able to calm yourself down and you're able to understand what the other person is saying, pay attention, understand it, and then respond in a more responsible way. Also, it then leads you to better decision-making and improved relationships in general. Now, the overarching importance of self-regulation is the impact that it has on your health. I remember last year, I had a personal, very stressful situation that was happening to me. And I was so stressed out that it actually started showing out in my body. And my back, it went in, it just one day just went like, I could feel like I heard my back go, like electricity was going through my back. And my neck actually started locking up. It was a terrible experience, very terrible. It was painful. I had difficulty sleeping because of the pain I was enduring in my neck and my back. I actually eventually had to go for therapy, for physical therapy, in order to get myself back into order again. But the recognition that this was actually caused by my inability to self-regulate when it came to that personal stimuli, that's what actually brought up the lack of the problems I started having with my health. And so it is such an important matter that your mind knows how to handle, learns how to handle stressful situations and impulses that can cause you to then develop and hurt yourself physically. Because whatever you think, obviously, starts translating to your emotions. And then the stress, as the stress compounds, it starts manifesting in your body. And so it's very important as a person for you to know how to self-regulate. Okay, so the next I'm going to just talk about 3 ways that you can self-regulate. Because it's one thing to say you need to self-regulate, but then you might not know how to self-regulate. But there are many ways to do it. But one of the ways is to practice self-awareness. And that is where you become aware of what your emotions are and be able to identify what your emotional state is. For example, if I'm exhausted, right? If I'm aware that I'm exhausted, know that I'm exhausted, or when I'm sleepy, then I'm cranky, right? That helps me, in fact, writing down the emotions that you're feeling, for example, that will help you to calm you down and to calm your thinking down so that you're able to then focus on the values, the things that you actually value rather than the negative emotion. One simple example is waking up in the morning to exercise. That's one of the things that a lot of people struggle with. And sometimes I struggle with that too. But my goal, let's say I've got the goal of losing weight, I need to get up, I need to work out before I start my work day. Well, if I don't self-regulate, it's very easy for me to just choose to stay in bed and say, oh, I need to sleep in, I need to sleep in. And this is what happened to me one day. And then before you know it, it's a habit that you're no longer getting up to do the exercises. And then now you're gaining the weight that you didn't want to gain, which is what pretty much happened to me a few months ago. I had to start it all over the whole regiment of exercising, being self-aware of what do I need to do to make sure that I get up on time to do my exercises. Another way to self-regulate is to slow down and pause before responding. Because a lot of times we are so busy and ready to respond or to speak when somebody else is speaking. Some people even go to the degree of interrupting people when they're through talking, which, well, not only is it rude, but it also shows that you're not regulating yourself. So when you slow down and pause before you respond, it gives you time to calm down, put your thoughts together, and then respond in a manner that is appropriate and that is positive and building. And the last is exercising cognitive reappraisal or reframing. Sometimes when we are confronted, especially with the things that bring fear to us, sometimes we have what is irrational fear. But when you start reframing the context in which something is happening, that will help you to then develop a different emotion, which will then lead you to take a different action to deal with that situation. So those are the three ways that I would recommend you definitely practice. Practice self-awareness, which includes things like journaling and meditation. You slow down and pause before you respond. There's no rush. You can definitely take your time in responding, especially when you're in a situation which is heated and if you need to diffuse emotionally charged situations. And then the last one is reframing the situation. So whatever it is that trigger event that's happening, you can try to reframe it and see it in a different perspective. And that will allow you to then develop a different emotion, which will then lead you to take a different action, which will lead to more positive outcomes. But definitely, it's very important to be able to self-regulate, again, maybe for the benefit of the fact that it helps you to have less stress and to be healthier. Thank you.
Grace, that's awesome. Hold on, let me change the view to gallery. So, wow, that was so amazing. I threw a bunch of notes in there because I was trying to keep track of some of the things you said, and also any of you can save the chat, and there are some notes in there that might stimulate or help you to remember some of the things that Dr. Grace presented. Before I start asking her questions, do any of you who are in the audience have questions? And if you don't want to speak, you can go ahead and post it in the chat and I will read that to you. And while you're thinking, I did have a question. Let's see if I can find where. So actually, when Grace, when you were talking about that boss who lost her cool, and that was in a meeting with other people, is that correct?
Yes.
So that's extremely embarrassing. And then she probably could never regroup after that because she had totally undermined herself by doing that. No, didn't she? Yeah.
Yes, she did. She did. I mean, unfortunately for her, things just went downhill because she lost the respect from everybody in the team. It was just sad, really.
So a lot of people might think that self-regulation is controlling your emotions, that and many of us were taught from very early on, hi Susan, to tap those emotions down. In fact, when I was growing up, I was so clueless of my emotions that if somebody hurt my feelings, I might not know it for like 2 or 3 days. Because
that can happen for sure. And I think one really has to learn it because a lot of times people are not taught this,
That's right.
it's like kind of figure it out as you grow. But, nowadays there is like for example, in my emotional intelligence program, there is a whole number of tools that are there for you that you can utilize to learn how to to develop self-awareness. And all these other parts of emotional intelligence, remember I mentioned that there were 5 parts, and to develop all of those areas. And there are actually things that can be taught. And one thing I like about emotional intelligence is that I learned through research that people develop emotional intelligence throughout life. They can develop it throughout life, unlike IQ, which apparently it develops from and tapers off to at about 16 to 25 years old. Then it kind of tapers off. Emotional intelligence can be developed throughout life, and definitely doing an emotional intelligence program, like the program that I offer, it also includes things like taking an assessment, an emotional intelligence assessment, to determine where exactly are you in different areas that pertain to emotional intelligence, and then allowing you to focus on those particular areas so that you can develop and become the best you that you can be. And definitely learning to self-regulate is going to propel you and help you in all areas of your life, whether you're a leader, a mom, a CEO, or whatever you are. It will definitely help you to be more successful and more effective and impactful in a positive way.
So Dr. Grace, how is self-regulating different from just repressing your emotions?
The difference is in how I think the difference is in the shifting, because suppressing your emotions, like your emotion is still there, but you can just imagine you have a bottle of emotions that is flared up, and now it's in a bottle, and now you're suppressing it, so you're moving it down. But once given an outlet, it's going to just explode. Whereas with the self-regulation, you're going to change your emotion from that explosive, damaging emotion to something that's more constructive and positive.
Ellen wrote here, not only did the boss embarrass herself, she embarrassed me. Oh, so Ellen mentioned, hi, Ellen, thank you for posting, that she had a boss who was like that in her life. And that the boss, not only did she embarrass herself, she embarrassed me as a subordinate in her group. Ellen, do you want to say anything more about that? Or do you have any questions for Grace regarding that particular experience? You're unmuted.
I don't know that I have any questions. I just remember when that occurred in a big executive meeting, and I was the one that was supporting her with all the information. So I felt by that time when she embarrassed herself, I could just imagine that the audience may not have thought my information was credible. And it was embarrassing for me too. I mean, I just lost a lot of respect for her.
Well, Grace, Dr. Grace, I'm sure that when your boss acted that way, you were embarrassed too, right? Because
oh yeah. I mean, me and my counterpart in Aurora, we just looked at each other, and she was like, "What just happened?" It was just the weirdest thing. It was embarrassing, but more than embarrassing was just the long-term damage that it brought to the relationship and to the team as a whole, because we never actually recovered until such a time that she left. She ended up being the company ended up splitting again, and then they put her on one half, which was not with us.
Oh, well, that was lucky, wasn't it? Yes.
That it really was, and I was so thankful. Everybody was really happy when she left, and thank God we actually got a different manager who was actually the exact opposite. He was very, I feel that he was very emotionally intelligent. He was able to regulate himself, and he practiced a lot of empathy, which I think is critical in your vacation, whatever you do, to be able to self-regulate.
So one of the things that could affect your ability to self-regulate would be the amount of stress that you're under any particular time. For example, if there's a loss in your family, or there's a lot of conflict in your family, that's going to affect your ability in any moment to self-regulate. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. It definitely will, because if your mind, you know, the whole system that's controlled by our mind, which is the prefrontal lobe of our brains, is the one that controls our thinking brain. That's our thinking brain. And so when we are under stress, the amygdala is a part that takes over. It basically hijacks your thinking brain. And so you're not able to really think wisely, optimally, which is why when you're in an argument or in a stressful situation, you might not think of the right thing to say. You know, this even happens when you're in an interview, for example. You know, you can't think of the right thing to say, but then after the fact, now you think of all the comebacks that you had. And that's because your amygdala has hijacked your thinking brain. So if the situation is stressful, not only will it prevent you from being smarter, you know, it'll prevent you from being smarter, but it compounds to the problem of you manifesting the stress physically, because then you're not able to manage it, and it just makes it worse because you're already in a stressful situation. And because you can't handle your own stress, it just keeps adding more to it.
Yeah, it accelerates.
Yeah.
So Laura said, if you lose your emotions or you lose your regulation of your emotions, what can you do retroactively? Until you master self-regulation, you may lose it. And then what? Thank you, Laura. Great question.
Well, if you lose it, I think slowing down is one of the biggest tools that one has. I always think that before you lose it, you really should try to prevent yourself from losing it in the first place, because, you know, prevention is always better than sorry.
Then repair.
Than cure. Prevention is better than cure, I think is the phrase. And I think that in the first place, when you see that you are about to get into a heated situation, you have options. Like, for example, you can slow down, right? Because a lot of times people, when they see you slowing down, they try to match your pace, right? So when they see you slowing down and remaining calm, it actually helps you to regulate the other person's emotions by them trying to match you. But people have a tendency to, well, when somebody's yelling, then they try to out yell them. And so it just makes the situation worse. But if you recognize that this is happening or about to happen, you can slow yourself down. You can also do breathing techniques where you count from 10 to 1 slowly, you know, and you count. That will buy you some time in slowing down and also keeping yourself calm. So that's when you're already, if you are in the heated moment now, you can still do the same thing by just thinking to yourself, I need to slow down. And then you stop the counting. You can do this many times. You can do this count from 10 and several times. And then another technique you can do is breathing in and out while you're counting, holding your heart and focusing on your heartbeat. And that will help you as well to regulate your emotions. And that way you don't say things that you shouldn't have said. But one last thing you can say is that it's not always necessary to engage in battle with somebody. It's okay to walk away. And when I say walk away, I don't mean banging the door as you exit or hanging up the phone. That is not what I mean. What I mean is actually gently saying, okay, I need some time out. Please give me a moment to think. And then you can say words like, let's put it to rest for now and talk about it later when we are both calm. Or one thing that I've heard also in a work environment is something like, let's talk later when we can talk with each other respectfully. And I find that I have found, and I've seen this, that those techniques actually work to help both of you to calm down. And you walk away, like I'm saying, that will help you to rethink the situation. Was it really worth this? It allows you to rethink the situation and then think about what can we do to find a common ground that will move us forward in a positive way.
That's really excellent. So, of course, emotional regulation also can be helpful in marital relationships or intimate relationships. But I imagine that it's probably way more difficult to do that in those situations, because don't we tend to pick the people that really hit our buttons?
That's true.
Do you ever work with people around that kind of emotional regulation, or is it mostly with people who are involved in business and corporate environments that you work with?
Yeah, I do work with those people. And what I find is that the marital situation, I think, is a little more tough because of animosity that usually exists within those relationships. For some reason, people tend to, I think they are more fierce in their attack against the people that they are in a romantic relationship with than people that are outside. That's just what I think. I mean, this is not a scientific this point at all, not at all, but that's what I think. I feel like people, when they're in a romantic relationship, they tend to be more fierce as in attacking each other. And I think the reason is that they take things, the thing is more personal. It's more personal than in a work environment. People put some distance, they try to anyway, put some distance between their own personal emotions and the organization's stressors. But when you're talking about an emotional, a personal relationship, romantic one for that matter, then I think it tends to be more, people are more,
Charged, more charged.
yeah.
Yeah. So the things that I've discovered in the work that I do with people around their relationships, a lot of times it's, after they've lost it, but the problem is that people oftentimes bring people into their relationship that they have relationships with that mirror relationships that they had in childhood. And so when they respond in a given situation, they're actually bringing that whole history from their past into that moment. And that's what makes it so supercharged. Oftentimes they are responding in a much more volatile way than really the situation warrants, because they're bringing that whole
Absolutely.
baggage, that whole history.
Yes, that's accurate. I agree with that. Mhm.
So does anybody have any other questions? Susan, you want to unmute yourself and give the question?
Hi,
Hi, Susan, great to see you.
you too. I have this new appreciation of dysregulation over the last year and a half or so as I have studied repeating disruptive behavior in the workplace. Often involves people getting dysregulated around their behavior and their emotions. And that's another way of saying, how do you deal with people that, not yourself, because you gave us really good self-management techniques, but what about the other people that are going off? And what I've come to learn is that there's a whole class of people that have predictable patterns of dysregulation. And they often seem to want to do that to create you as the problem and to self-regulate by making problems and chaos and drama and finding fault and very skewed perception of the situation, very skewed cognitive appraisal of the situation. So I just wondered what, and the other thing I realized is that nobody really seems to, they kind of know it's off, but they don't really know how to recognize it or to say stop, or so I see a lot of managers accepting that. So any thoughts about how to make an intervention or anything that you do, and any 360 assessment tools that you use to help people get a clue on themselves and managers?
So these are, let me clarify your question. You're talking about people who actually dysregulate themselves, that is, misbehave. And are these subordinates? that the manager has to handle, or is these managers that the subordinates have?
Oh,
to-
it's a range in the workplace of
Mhm.
what I see is that people who can do something about it barely even recognize it, like boards, like managers, like CEOs. People's job is to help have a friendly environment. Don't see it a lot of times,
Mm,
and
interesting.
and so it creates that toxic environment.
Toxic environment, right? Yeah.
And what I learned, what I really just learned about is that it's predictable. There's these predictable patterns. Then they may not want to self-regulate.
So what's predictable about them? How are they predictable? In that you see them in very many organizations, or how do you mean predictable?
Well, they invalidate, they dismiss, they criticize, they find fault. They make people the reason for everything. Is they make them problems.
Blame.
They're not using rational tools.
Right.
They're predictably trying to manage their inattention by projecting it outward.
Ah,
Well,
okay. I got it. I got
and
it.
that takes a higher level of intervention because they don't see it and the external people don't stop it.
They are externalizing their inner turmoil
Yes,
and then putting it on other people because then they have somebody to blame. So
yes.
Dr. Grace, do you have any advice or any suggestions about that situation? Have you ever run into that?
Let me make sure that I actually heard you correctly first. You're saying this is a situation where a manager or a supervisor or a leader, someone in a leadership position is undermining, or they are not regulating themselves, and so the situation is hostile.
Well, and they predictably do that. It's not like you can give them some feedback and they can self-correct, like take a breath. They're going to stay in that mode.
Yeah, actually, I read somewhere that people that are in high positions sometimes are actually not, they need a lot of help, precisely because the people that they lead, that they are not leading effectively, and that they are not, that are feeling the heat of not self-regulating. They're too scared to do anything about them.
Right.
And then their superiors, they think they have it together already, so they don't give them the feedback they need. So my suggestion in that situation is, if you are subordinate that is feeling the heat of this and you cannot talk to your immediate manager, then most organizations, or some of them, they have a system in place where employees can air their grievances. In the first place, you yourself need to continue doing the right thing and being regulated yourself. You should always continue to maintain your professionalism and self-regulate yourself, because really the only person you can control is yourself. So you keep doing the right thing. That's the first thing. The second thing, then go through the other channels. It actually happened to me several years ago when I was working for this one company. A lady, at that time I was working in customer service, and one of the things that we used to do was, if you have a problem or a question that you can't solve, or you have a customer who's demanding to speak to a supervisor, for example, who is irate, then you would call what they called a resolution desk. The resolution desk or resolution center, it was manned by supervisors, like basically your superiors are the ones who manned. Different supervisors manned that resolution desk where you called. And one of the ladies who was on there, she was so irate. She was very, very belligerent, very condescending whenever I got on the phone to talk to her. So every time I talked to her, and I'm saying every time I talked to her, she would literally take the wind out of my sail. Mm-hmm. And then one day it just hit me. I said, this lady, why do I need to put up with her? And so I decided that whenever I call the resolution desk and it's her, I would just say, don't worry, I got this. And then I'd get off the phone and then I'd call again and speak to somebody else. That is how I initially decided to handle that. But then I also had a good relationship with my supervisor. So I had a conversation with him and I said, do you know, like when you come to work and then somebody just takes the wind out of your sail, you know? So anyway, I had this conversation with him about her. And do you know that the next day, that lady turned around. She was just so sweet. It was unbelievable. That is the same person. She was so nice to me, very sweet, very kind, very helpful. And it was the funny, and fate had it, you know, that I ended up, for some reason, after they shuffled the teams around, which they used to do, I ended up being put in her team. And I said, really, do I really need to be put under her team? But anyway, so I was put under her team soon after that, but she was just so supportive, very helpful and everything. So sometimes it's necessary to go to speak to somebody else, basically, who is able to talk to that person. And you know, and this happens not only in business, but it was also in personal relationships. Sometimes you're trying to resolve an issue with somebody, and they will not hear you unless they hear it from somebody else. From somebody else, you know what I mean? You just have to know who to talk to, and not trying to make them look bad or incriminate them. But you know, you just have to do what you got to do because life is too short, and you can't afford to be miserable at work. Every day, especially when you're going there every day for 8 hours a day and dealing with this one person who needs to get their act together. So my advice is just talk to somebody else who can address the person. If you don't have the power to address the person yourself, then you speak to somebody else.
Good.
So I have another solution, which is a little woo-woo. A number of years ago, I was working as a temp at this organization in New York City. And actually it took me a long time to get a job because for some reason at that time, temporary jobs were really hard to find. So I had this job and I was working for this vice president. And he was very, very friendly and jokey, except that he had a bad habit of not really explaining what he wanted. And then if I got it wrong, he would really blame me. And I did not I did not take unjustified criticism very well. So one time he gave me this manuscript and he said, send this upstairs to the boss upstairs. And the manuscript had a bunch of sticky tabs in it, but he didn't say anything to do with the sticky tabs. So I put it in an inter-office envelope and sent it upstairs. And then when he came back and he said, what did you do with the manuscript? I said, I sent it upstairs. And he said, but you sent it upstairs with all those little tabs on it? I said, yeah, it said on the front, personal and confidential, which it did. So he said, call the secretary upstairs, see what she did. And I called her up. He said, see if you can get it back. And I called her and I said, do you have the manuscript? She says, no, I sent it to the boss. It said personal and confidential. So anyway, I went home furious because he really, really berated me for not doing my job. And I thought, you know, this is a temp job. I don't have to stay in this job. I can leave. I'm only a temp. But then I decided, well, I have some issues around being defensive. Maybe I will treat this as an opportunity to develop self-regulation. So I went back with that attitude. And in 2 weeks, the man was promoted and transferred to Ohio. And I lived to have him call me on the phone and tell me how important and valuable I was to the running of that office.
Wow.
Well,
So
let me do another thing that I do. I'm a person of faith, and one of the things that I do is I pray for people. I pray for when I go to work. You know, I was in this team that was just hostile from the day one that I joined that team, and including that manager that I told you about. And I'll pray for my manager, and I'll pray for my team every time I went to work. In fact, I'd be that's what made me continue and to thrive in that team, because every morning I armed myself with the armor of prayer, and I'd get there and I'd pray for them. But the funny thing that happened is that as I was praying for her, and every day I'd pray for her, and I'd go through my day every day, and that would be fine. The company then did a split, and then she was removed. I really felt that that was an answer to prayer. She was literally, I just read, oh, she's actually been moved. Now she's going to be in the commercial side of the business, which is a totally different and renamed company. And then I was going to remain in this other company where we got this other manager who was just, wow, that manager was like a gift from God.
So
Because
that's another, that's another real secret weapon, that prayer. That's very powerful. Or, the mindset, or surrendering as opposed to fighting or frustrating. But to do, sometimes you feel like you literally don't have any power, but you always do. You always have that control over yourself. So I love that story, Grace. Thank you.
Well, can I talk?
Susan?
Yeah. Well, I think since Trump, there's all his kind of acting out behavior. Most recently with, well, there's something wrong with the whole electoral system, and we should audit everything, and he had no evidence and all that. And he got a lot of mileage out of that. So it was like the country kind of witnessed nobody speaking up and being confrontation. And now I just think a lot of this is playing out politically. And then there's a Republican Party that says, no, nobody try to burn down the White House. I mean, there's so many defenses going on now, or yes, they did. And so the thing I'm reading a lot about more recently is psychologists. I mean, we can't diagnose people, I know that. But psychologists are talking a lot about narcissism or bad behavior and and that's what I meant about predictable patterns of
Bad behavior.
And they're all commenting. What I read a lot now, which has helped me, is it's in addition to prayer, but you also have to know how to take care of yourself and recognize it and set boundaries in a way, respectfully, but just kind of not let that in and know your boundaries and be able to recognize that's them dysregulated. And if you don't have, if you're not in the hierarchy of the power structure, you still have to take care of yourself. So that's what I hear psychologists talking a lot about now: narcissism, cluster B, taking care of yourself, recognizing these things. And the other thing that stood out to me, because I'm a big emotional intelligence person, right? I like all this training, I like all that stuff. But when they say, you know what, you have to get it that these people don't want to change and they won't change, and find a way to accept that as well.
Well, the word narcissism, I think, is sort of a derogatory term that we use to dismiss somebody. But
Right.
what I have found is that oftentimes people who are narcissistic, or we call them narcissistic, came from a childhood that was chaotic, or it was abusive, or it was
Right.
unsafe, and that they learn patterns that help to protect them. And then the ones that really misbehave, this is kind of like another iteration, are the ones that I call the rebels. That is, that really misbehave a lot like Trump. I'm sure that Trump has got some heavy duty childhood stuff in which the only way he could get attention was by misbehaving. And so he was rewarded for that. And he became addicted to the negative response because he got some response at all. So it's as we start to learn about the different patterns that are out there and not take people's responses to us as something that's wrong with us, but to see them as manifestations of their own biographies,
Right.
It starts to help.
Right. I'm just throwing that in for what we can do, because
Right.
that's
Absolutely.
been my big learning. And yes, trauma is also often the background that drives that. And the word that we can say is high conflict people. That is what we get to say, characteristics of high conflict people on a continuum.
Well, they actually get addicted to the hormonal release in their body
Right.
that happens from drama. They get addicted to that. And so they actually don't feel like they're alive unless they're in drama.
Right. So, see, so all of that, I was just raising that because I'm more aware of it now.
Yes.
And I've always been on the leadership development ends of things with the what you can do and how you can improve and how everybody, and now I'm realizing, oh, there are some very definite places now where I have to shift my belief about things and accept that is how, like I said, they're predictable patterns.
Yes. Very good. So does anybody else have questions to ask Dr. Grace before we start to close the meeting? Danielle, we haven't heard from you. Oh, Dr. Grace has got a free gift. Can you explain what the free gift is?
It's actually just a report that I put together about how leaders, experts, entrepreneurs, how they self-sabotage their own success. And so it just gives some pointers on how people do that and how to avoid self-sabotage in your own success.
Oh, that's lovely. That's really helpful to how to avoid self-sabotage in your own life. And I'm assuming that this is around your emotions, learning how to regulate your emotions. Is that correct?
It's well, that's one of the points.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe more reasons why you might sabotage yourself. Ellen, do you have any more questions, or Laura, before I wrap up? No? Anybody have any issues that they would like to get some insights or support from Dr. Grace? We don't have that much time left, but we have a few minutes. Anybody?
So I have a question.
Great.
What can you do when you're in a position where you're a person of authority, like your boss talks to you in a condescending way, and when they ask you questions about whatever you're doing and you try to answer them, and before you get your answer even halfway through, they interrupt you to talk about something else or ask something else? How do you do that? I unfortunately, I was at the point then when I was so stressed that I lost it and I cried, and of course then that took away from my credibility as a leader, because there I am crying in my boss's office, who's condescending to begin with. What I prefer to do is be able to just say, stop the conversation, but that's not always practical with your boss either.
Yeah, it's not advised to cry in such situations, but it's understandable when it has happened over and over again. At some point, everybody has a limit, when they can put up with certain things, and it's totally understandable. And the first thing I would advise is that when you feel like you want to cry, then it's time to excuse yourself and go somewhere else and do the crying out of sight from the person who's doing this to you. That's the first thing. Then the second thing is I would recommend that first of all, you yourself remain, keep your own cool. Keep your own cool. Don't let it, I would let it in one ear and out the other. That is how I handled it. Whenever I had a situation like that, I would let it in one ear and out the other. And then of course I also utilize prayer in my efforts to cope with the people that are like that. And it's just unfortunate. I've had a lot of experiences in different settings with the hostility from leaders or people that are higher than me. So there's that. I think those two things. One is don't take it personally, and two, don't allow yourself to break down in front of them. You need to maintain your composure. And then the third thing that you could do is when the situation or the topic that is creating the condescending situation is over, I would also recommend having a conversation with the person about how you feel about what they're doing. And when I say how you feel, I don't mean accusing them of anything. You have to craft the conversation in such a way that you are talking about yourself and you're saying, I feel this. When you do this, I feel this, versus you're doing this to me. You get it? Because whenever you talk to somebody in a way that is accusatory, it automatically creates some level of conflict and lack of cooperation. So my advice would be when everything is nice, this is like what I do in my relationships. For example, if I'm having a relationship, a conflict in my relationship, then I don't let any weapons that are formed against me prosper in my head. I do not do that, I just let it go. But then on another day, when everything is fine, I say, okay, remember when we had this conversation and this happened? I felt this. And when you do this, this is how I feel. And then you see, if the person is sensible, then they're going to be more respectful of you, of the fact that you were honest with them to tell them that. Unless it's just a, what do you call it? One of those, there's a word for people that are just impossible. I can't remember the word. But
Impossible works.
yeah, does that help, Ellen?
Yeah, it does. And unfortunately, while you were talking, what went through my mind is she would not react well to that. So I consider that type of whatever you want to call it, she's the impossible person, no matter what I would say. Because I could imagine going in there and saying, the other day we had this conversation, I heard this, and I could imagine her saying, well, what's wrong? What did you hear? Why? And to a point, the questions would, if I was to answer them, would direct back to her. I don't know how I would keep it focused on me.
Okay, then your plan B is to find a person, a person who that person respects, and then talk to that person and have them be the mediator. Because then that person may be able to actually be heard. And I would go about it that way next.
So that's a great suggestion, but let me tell you what happened next. And I don't know if it's a person she respected, so I don't know about that part of it, but I got HR involved and tried to have them mediate the conversation. She did the same thing. She just kept interrupting all the conversations, and she got up out of the room and left. So that's why I believe she's impossible. There's no way you could break through to her. Me.
Yeah.
No way I could break through to her.
Well, yeah, then I think once it's been escalated to HR, then HR is the one that needs to deal with her. Maybe when she gets enough, maybe if you complain to HR enough times, then maybe they can take a different stance to the situation because
that's a weak link.
Yeah, because
that organization.
Oh, that's a weak link. Yes. Okay. So
anyway, we're good. Thank you.
Well, I just want to suggest one more thing, which is when all else fails, you have to just deal with yourself. As you had said, you have to take care of yourself. You have to set your boundaries. And one of the ways in which you need to help with your self-regulation is you have to decompress. You have to let those emotions of frustration out, not at work, but at home, so that you are able to continue, or you actually have to leave the job, which is,
which is what I ended up doing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, that sometimes, if the oven is too hot, you've got to get out.
Yeah, that's really a really great piece of advice. Well, I want to close because we're at the top of the hour, and it's been really lovely having all of you. And Dr. Grace, thank you so much. Your information was so wonderful. And remember, you can look at the replay if you came in late. You can watch the replay, or if you've forgotten some of the things she said. You gave us so many good pieces of information about how emotional intelligence works and why you want to have it work in your life. Next meeting is going to be on the 4th Friday at 9 o'clock in the morning. We're going to have Reverend Andrea Scott Brown, who's going to tell us how to heal our money issues, which also has to do with mindset. And money issues can really affect your health just as much as not being able to regulate yourself. So she is, Andrea is, Reverend Andrea is the founder of the Audacious Path program, and she's going to help you to invite more prosperity into your life. So please come back. Any final words? If not,
thank you, Dr. Grace.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you. If you would like to connect with me, please feel free. I just put in my website there. You can just connect with me there and we can set up a call where we can talk and see how we can help each other.
Dr. Grace, I don't see your website in there. Please make sure you put that in.
Okay, there it is.
There you go. Okay.
There you go.
So you can click on the three dots next at the bottom of the chat, and you can save the chat, and any of the information I put in and any of the information Dr. Grace put in will be there for you. Have an awesome evening. Take care of yourself. Until next time, be brilliant, and bye for now.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Nice to meet
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.